There are so many things we could say about how this family mentioned in this scripture pertains to what we're living as a human family, as a church family, even as a national family. We are also in a time of crisis. Now, whether you're familiar with the Bible or whether you're not really sure why we keep referring back to this ancient document, here's something we all need to keep in mind. It's a book of stories. The Bible is filled with drama and feuds and fiery exchanges and parties and laughter and death and mourning. Most of the families that are described are a mess. Believe me, our deepest and darkest secrets about our families hold nothing over family dysfunction found in the Bible. Anytime you're bogged down with family drama or fights, you might call them misunderstandings, and you're thinking, nobody's ever had this many problems. Or, why can they not see the light? Or, I really thought I'd raise these kids better than this. You're not alone. Millions of other people have experienced exactly that before us. In the text that Roger read for us, we come into a story that is already well underway. So here we evidently have a reunion, but probably a reunion like you and I have never experienced. We thought some of our Thanksgiving get-togethers had some pretty colorful people coming to them and under peculiar circumstances, but I don't think we have a clue. So let's back up and peek at what's happened before this. Taking it a few generations back just so that you know where we're coming from, Abraham, who has been called the father of the Jewish people, as well as the father of the Muslim people, had many children with numerous women. Only 2 children are mentioned more than in passing in our scriptures. Ishmael, only son of Hagar and Abraham, who carried the family line into Islam, and we hear about him only briefly. And then Isaac, only son of Sarah and Abraham, who's mentioned extensively and carried on the family line into Judaism. So Jacob, one of the sons of Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob was one of the sons of Isaac and Rebekah. He, in turn, had 13 sons, and with 4 women. I'm not sure if there were any daughters because only a few of those were ever recorded in the genealogies of ancient times. So one of these sons of Jacob and Rachel, his wife, was Joseph, and that's where we come into this story. That's the main character of this story. As you can imagine, there would have been a few family squabbles with this many siblings and so many parental units. In fact, there were much more than squabbles. They had intrigue, betrayal, power struggles, arrogance and anger, cold-blooded revenge, conniving behind parents' backs, blended families with lots of sibling rivalry, despair and grief, interventions and mercies of God, lack and plenty, guilt and shame, sorrow and favor, superstition, fear, ritual, blending spirituality with cultural practices. So you think I'm making this up. But seriously, it's all there for your your reading pleasure, right there. Oh yes, and Aravis and Rossi alluded to something. There's something else you need to be aware of. Joseph's half-brothers had sold him as a slave years before in a fit of rage and jealousy. That's right, a slave. We can't match that, probably. Many years passed, including Joseph being incarcerated for something he didn't do. So that happened back then already. And yet, somehow, Joseph was promoted to being second in command in Egypt. In Joseph's new position, he developed and oversaw an entire food production and distribution program during a 7-year famine, drawing people from the surrounding nations who came simply to save their lives. His brothers were among those who streamed into the land. There were numerous exchanges over the period of time during which they came and went for food. In one of these interactions, the one we read today, Joseph reveals his identity. He had known them all along, but they hadn't known him. When the brothers realize who Joseph is and that he recognizes them, they're terrified that he's going to take revenge on them. Understandably so. All of this happened in one family. And then out of seemingly nowhere, this reunion takes place. Humanity has always been messy. The biblical narrative only underscores this. The Bible is not a book of rules and regulations, though it does contain some. It's not a guidebook or a checklist for life or a collection of writings that will answer all of your questions. That's not its design or intent. Though the Bible does contain the Jewish Torah, the 5 books of origins and law, of which Genesis is one, it is literature. It's stories. It's poetry, imagery, and allegory. Some of it is wisdom literature. Humanity has had its cruel, dark periods. It has also had shining, brilliant moments where undeserved grace was extended and human goodness overruled the predominantly historical mood. Quite unexpectedly, indomitable light patches in the darkness. Treachery has always been a part of history. God's presence and unpredicted appearances and actions and people's goodness also have been. It seems as if chaos and evil predominate. Some long for a better time that once was. Nostalgia, one might say. But nostalgia has been referred to remembering a past that never was. If it seems that chaos and evil predominate, this could scare and utterly paralyze us. Or it could encourage us to realize that we're not alone. We are not unique. There is nothing new under the sun. And in spite of the mess, there has always been the appearance and possibility of significant joy. This story oozes with joy. There is a second chance at family. There is a chance at actually outliving a devastating famine. There can be forgiveness and restitution. All of that. Life is so unpredictable, but this up and down and in and out and back and forth is the rhythm of life on this planet. Let's have a look at all of the joy that kind of seeps around the edges of this story. Do you remember a time when you were so excited about something that you were just waiting to get all the extraneous people out of the room so that you could tell this amazing story to your best friend or your partner or a brother or a sister? Well, that's the feeling I get with Joseph in this story. He sends all of his attendants out so that it can just be us. And then comes the big reveal. I am your brother, Joseph. His brothers are stunned, of course. What did he expect? All kinds of thoughts rush into their minds. What? Joseph? Their father's favorite son? Joseph, the one who bragged about being a ruler when he was just a kid? Joseph, the one whom they thought they had gotten rid of and dealt with once and for all? The same Joseph that had plagued their dreams over the years since they sold him into slavery, that one? What now? But quickly Joseph allays their fears. No, 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 no. Don't be hard on yourself. Don't blame yourself. It was actually a good thing that I came to be here. How else would I have gotten here? And I'm here so that you can have a way of surviving. They're even more stunned. Do you notice? They don't have one word to say. Not one. I imagine their words came later, especially when they were by themselves again, on their way home with the donkeys laden with the grain that they're bringing back, and accompanied by an entourage to help bring the clan back to Egypt. Joseph had had plenty of time to plot revenge. Remember, he spent time in prison. He was a slave. Life was not great for him. But the years did not make him bitter. His blood connection, his love, his concern far outweighed the position that had now been given to him. It seems he knew that he would never have gotten to this place had it not been through divine mandate. There are some things that take place in our lives which we cannot orchestrate. And if we're honest, we know that. The work Joseph had done to get to this place was not primarily external. It was internal, hidden work. Where did he learn to rule a nation? Where did the aptitude for commerce and know-how to implement an international program of this magnitude come from? How did he circumvent the self-importance that too often accompanies positions of power? How did he develop people skills? He didn't have those when he was a youngster, and that's what his brothers remember. How did he learn to accept his newfound unsolicited notoriety, including the ability to embrace and absorb the evil that had been done to him over the years? How could he care about this family of origin, including those he had never yet met, to the degree that he would invest so much consideration and so many resources for their well-being? Somewhere, somehow, everything about Joseph had changed. In the preceding chapters of Genesis, we read the story I referred to at the beginning. A dizzying array of events. But the recurring words are, God was with him. God blessed him. Now that didn't keep him from being sold into slavery, having to work as a slave, being seduced, slandered, and imprisoned. In spite of that, he kept on surviving and even flourishing. And if that seems like too much of a pat answer to you, I'm with you. I am not for a moment denying that God was with him and that God blessed him tremendously. But I believe there are also times humans sabotage good divine intentions through a series of choices to the contrary. Let me pursue that just for a moment. Joseph had no way of knowing the plans of God. No humans do. It's as if we have a narrator helping us as we read this story, helping us understand that God was with him and God blessed him. Joseph didn't have that. At some point, Joseph made the decision to live with integrity regardless of what was thrown his way. So all of that, including the goodness and the presence of God, ultimately resulted in joy, reunion, healing old standing wounds, making it possible to survive a 7-year famine. Those are no small matters. Does all of this cause you to think about a global pandemic? The enormous upheaval and challenges of isolation and trying to control the spread of its insidious virus, an economy burdened by incompetent, cruel leadership, the threat to a fair and equitable election, tens upon tens of thousands of people dying, ongoing atrocities like children in cages, and people still being targeted, people of color still being targeted on our streets. Somehow the long litany of life-shattering events which spatter Joseph's life like fresh paint on an unprotected floor reminds me of life events that we are experiencing day by day. Is God with us? Is God blessing us? Sometimes we find it difficult to answer these questions. We don't have the advantage of a narrator giving us behind the scenes extras. We don't have to have the answer, nor demand an answer. But we do have an opportunity to choose how we respond to our everyday experiences. How do we become people who invite and radiate joy? This past week, I watched an address given by Rob Bell in LA. It's a recent gathering, but definitely pre-COVID, by how closely together they were sitting. If you're not familiar with Rob Bell, well, he's an eclectic, eccentric, spiritual breath of fresh air. But don't take my word for it. This is just how I experience him. I really love to listen to him. So this address that I watched was entitled An Introduction to Joy. This is this address that he gave is both an experience of entertainment and just a deep dive into the depth of humanity. And it's genius when you can put those two together. Bell cites numerous passages from the book of Ecclesiastes, part of the ancient Hebrew wisdom literature. The wisdom teacher he quotes frequently uses the word meaningless, making the case that hard work as well as laziness, and knowledge as well as folly, and good times as well as hard times, and family and everything that we experience that makes life on this planet is meaningless. Now, if that's not a downer. However, Bell draws our attention to the Hebrew word havel, which has been translated as meaningless. He says it's much more accurate to translate it as vapor. Vapor, like fog. Think of San Francisco Bay Area fog. Bell says our life comes and goes as quickly as vapor, and then it's gone. He challenges his hearers not to deny the difficult things, the heartbreaks, the losses, the assaults on our own person, culture, human experience, but to dive deeply into them. They're part of our vapor. He says that we can only do this if we know that as we dive in, we can and we will come out the other side and attain joy and true satisfaction. Not naivete, not ignorance, not denial, but true joy because we realize that life has not gotten the better of us. This vapor has not destroyed us. Bell says this kind of joy is not afraid to openly admit pleasure, small pleasures, expressing wonder and awe, entering deeply into the beauty that is presented to us every day. This is exactly what I see playing out in the last verses of this text. It's pure joy at having survived that deep dive into the horrors of life, having come out the other side in order to say, hurry, go back to your father. Tell him your son Joseph says This joy is able to say, don't delay. Hurry and bring my father down here. And assure them that this is real. Even though he's a ruler of Egypt, he embraces them. He weeps. He shows how overwhelmed he is at seeing them. Not ashamed to do that. This acceptance, this forgiveness, this offer of more than they could imagine is real. If this joy is truly possible, then there's nothing new under the sun is far from being a curse. Words that indicate drudgery, inevitability, resignation. No! Let these words be a sign of hope. There is nothing new under the sun. So that means others have been on a similar journey and have had the offer to come out the other side. There is nothing new under the sun, which means a shining light is possible. It's never too late to learn or to adjust or to cultivate a new perspective. This is a perfect season in which to do it. For some of us and for some of our fellow citizens, what we are living right now is comparable to Joseph being sold into slavery, being confined to prison, to waiting and waiting and waiting to be remembered and released. We too are waiting and waiting for change. But we can do more than wait. We can take up the challenge, take the deep dive into the pain and suffering and anxiety and fear and anger of this time, determining with every fiber of our stubborn beings to come out the other side defiantly joyful. Bell says, joy is like musculature. It gets stronger with use. Joy does not come from avoiding the pain of life, nor suppressing it. It comes from going all the way into the heart of it, embracing it, and coming out the other side. If I were to give this sermon a title this morning, as opposed to Tuesday in time for the e-news, I would entitle it, Creators and Curators of Joy. We, all of us, we can be creators and curators of joy. This is the challenge I leave with all of us this morning. Amen.